Michael Sidgwick, you know that I am a Rock guy. I prefer The Rock to Stone Cold Steve Austin. I appreciate what Stone Cold did as an Attitude Era fan growing up, but I was always a guy who loved The Rock, was a huge fan of The Rock, and we were lucky enough to see The Rock at WrestleMania 40. But WrestleMania 38, night one, what a night that was. And I was conflicted. I wasn't sure whether to pick, obviously, Cody Rhodes' return, but I feel like I've spoken that a lot at WrestleMania 38, which was the surprise pop that you got there of people anticipated and hoped it was going to happen. We didn't know for certain. It could have been Shane. But it was Cody, and obviously I nearly passed out from screaming next to Phil Chambers about him coming back. We knew Stone Cold was coming back. There was sort of allusions to it in the whole build to WrestleMania, and then he said as much. But it was going to be a talk show segment, and that's fine because you thought, well, we might just get a stunner in there. It's the main event of night one at the end of the day, and yet nothing could prepare me to be in Texas in that stadium for the glass shattering. I'd never seen Stone Cold Steve Austin live before, so that was an amazing experience as well. But the noise, it's the first video I go to when people ask me about going to watch wrestling live, because it's synonymous, obviously, the glass shatter, as I say, but the reaction of just an entire stadium of Texans standing on their feet. And then it was sort of a pop that grew as well, because you had, first of all, him coming out and doing the big, riding up and down and what have you, and saying hello to everyone in the stadium pretty much. Then you had the moment where Kevin Owens said, "I tricked you, Steve," and you're like, we're getting a match. And then there was the one final one when you thought, he can actually still wrestle, because there was a brief moment there, wasn't there, where he was sort of stomping in the corner and you thought, oh no, he's really old now. And then he went on to take a bump on the concrete and you thought, everything's fine. The ending of that match was class. The beers was flying around. But yeah, the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin after so many years at WrestleMania is something I'll never ever forget.
So despite the image that Andy Murray has decided to display this wonderful event with, thanks Andy.
Hey, there are worse things from that show.
Yeah. I was very, very lucky to be in attendance for the original All In Chicago. Me and Miller went over there to cover it for WhatCulture, and it was the weirdest vibe in a building, because you go inside and it's like people always say about oh, you can feel the electricity in the room and things, and The Rock with his goddamn manner.
Yeah.
It was like there was a buzz in that building before anything had happened that was like people knew that this was something different, this was something special, this is something that had come out of just a pure love of wrestling on the independent scene, obviously with the Cody Rhodes, Dave Meltzer bet thing and the Elite starting it all. Everybody in that building was there to celebrate wrestling in the best possible way. And even before anything started, there was an electricity in the air, there was chants, there was people were going nuts for stuff, just for a light turning on, people were going absolutely mental. And then as it started and the show, because it sort of slowly escalated through all the matches and things, the buzz just never stopped, and it's the most elongated single pop I think you could possibly imagine, because the whole show was that one pop. And when it built to the crescendos in the matches, and especially the mental main event that went so fast because they had no time left in the show to be able to actually do it, that everybody in that building was just so loud, so involved with everything that the wrestlers were putting out there, so just into it as a pure joyous fan experience. And it was just the loudest building. It was 10,000 people echoing around that arena in Chicago for 3 hours, and it was genuinely incredible and one of the best live sort of wrestling moments that I've ever been a part of. And it's not one specific thing, it's just that entire show. It was just special, it was just different.
So it's Cody finishing the story. I know it's very recent. I know that probably involves a little bit of bias. It also involves a lot of me having a really atrocious memory and not being able to recall things very quickly. But at the same time, I mean, it was absolutely magic. Look, I'm a chaos guy. I've got a t-shirt with a rubber chicken on it. I luxuriated in just the fume of WrestleMania 39, the widespread, what on earth happened? Why did he lose? Why is there a chicken in the ring? What on earth is going wrong? And look, that was a big payday for Big Content Inc. as well. So, chaos is my jam. Kind of like it when things go a little bit wrong. this kind of overshadows all of that, though, because when you're in the stadium with 60,000 people and the purity of the moment and everyone is rooting for the same thing and every other voice in that entire building wants to see this one singular thing that they've been waiting for like a year and a half. When it finally happens and everyone leaps up and jumps on their feet and screams themselves hoarse, you're at the end of a 4-hour show or whatever. Nothing else matters in the entire world. And this was just the perfect wrestling moment for Triple H's WWE. I think of all the things WWE should be commended for over the past couple of years, certainly figuring out what their audience wants and continually delivering on that, even after the rubber chicken incident, is their biggest achievement by far. And it was such a fun, silly match as well. Like, obviously, Roman and Cody, I think, and I don't think this gets said enough because the match was all about like pomp and fireworks and interferences and people countering each other and battling off, and that's why it was so good. But Roman and Cody have incredible in-ring chemistry as well. They have proper like old school WWF main eventer vibes whenever they throw down. So they were having this incredible wrestling match to lead up to the various interferences and stuff, and you get the Usos and you get John Cena desperately trying to cover his bald patch as he rushes around the ring. You get The Rock, you get the Dead Man, and look, the dead Man got one hell of a pop. Steve Austin would have got a bigger one, and he might have been the entrance on this list if he'd been involved in the match instead of the Dead Man, but I digress. Cody winning the belt for me, it was just the most fun, joyous, euphoric moment that I've ever experienced as a wrestling fan live. And I think that the live experience took it to an entirely new level.
Oh my God, there is nothing like a pop in pro wrestling. It's bringing up goosebumps under this jacket, even in the heat right now, just thinking about it. As wrestling fans, we're told to attend as many of the meccas of the industry as we possibly can. Madison Square Garden, Wembley Stadium, the Boston Garden, these historic venues. But nothing for me has ever compared to attending the All-State Arena. Steve Austin would call it the Rosemont Horizon if he didn't know if he was working or shooting. But he himself spoke of that classic match he had with Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 13 as the loudest night that he'd ever experienced as a pro wrestler. The building, the noise, how everything was on top of him. And then it kind of became the building that CM Punk made famous / infamous with that iconic night at Money in the Bank against John Cena. It was the Chicago hotbed, itself a hotbed of pro wrestling. And I was worried that I'd attended it at basically the worst time to experience it. 2019, not really considered a very hot time for WWE. I was going to be attending the Survivor Series where it was Raw versus SmackDown versus NXT and a bunch of matches that didn't really make a lot of sense and didn't promise to make any new stars. But fortunately, I was able to go to NXT the night before, back when it was maybe in the post-credits era of itself. If TakeOver New York had been the season finale, the remaining takeovers kind of been a stay of execution as AEW was about to ultimately replace what the old black and gold was there for. But it felt like there was one last great night and I was there for it. TakeOver War Games. The opening match had been a kind of modern contemporary War Games classic, maybe the best one they've ever done since bringing the gimmick back. But the main event was all about one moment. The Undisputed Era taking on 3 NXT babyfaces in need of a mystery partner. The rumours have been swirling that it was going to be Kevin Owens, so the element of Owens being there wasn't the surprise and it wasn't what generated the pop. It was merely the fact that he had gone, pun intended, all in for the night. He was back in his NXT Kevin Owens attire, the original 2014/2015 Titantron video played, and a man that, let's be honest, had looked fairly depressed doing his job for several years, for one night got the feeling back. He screamed. That primal scream as he walks to the ring was matched only by a sold-out All-State Arena, absolutely losing it for him. And there it was. I got that one experience. I got the experience that Steve Austin had described for all those years against the man that would ultimately get the match against Steve Austin when he finally returned. All felt right in the world. There was nowhere else in the world I wanted to be other than Chicago, Illinois, other than in the All-State Arena, watching those wood panels rattle as I'd been told by law. It was pure magic.
So when it comes to my loudest pop that I've ever heard, like in the flesh, in an arena, in a stadium, that kind of thing, It's an interesting one because I'm well aware that when it comes to this particular wrestler that I'm going to talk about, my moment, my like biggest pop, it probably won't even break into their top 10 pops of all time by the end of their career. When most people think of this wrestler, they'll be like, no, it's not even, don't get anywhere near the top 10. But for me, because it was such a personal moment and it was something I never thought I'd see in the flesh, I'm going for CM Punk turning up at Wembley. Now, that was massive. That was absolutely massive for little old Gareth, because like many of us, like most of us probably in the wrestling world, we didn't think we were going to see Punk again up until like a couple of years ago, and then he popped up in AEW. That was a huge moment, and then AEW announced that they were going to be doing All In at Wembley, and I started putting two and two together, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a chance here that I'm going to see CM Punk like live in a stadium, in Wembley Stadium. My mind started getting blown, so I was like, wow, I hope this happens. Like, obviously there was a lot of drama going on in AEW at the time, and then it did eventually like get confirmed that he was going to be there, so I was like, oh my god, I'm going to get to see it. And then it happened. Cult of Personality just came through the speakers, and the sound in that stadium that day when that happened, the only thing I can equate it to is like when somebody scores a last minute winner in a football match. If you've ever been in a stadium when that happens, the roar, that's what it was. It was just this noise, and I was like, whoa, this is it. And I had chills, and I was chanting CM Punk and singing Cult of Personality. I was in my element, and it was just such a personal thing for me because I just never thought I'd see it. I thought I'd miss my chance. I thought I was never going to come back to wrestling, this icon. And then I was there. I was on the floor. I was on like in a floor seat. I was very lucky, and I was just absolutely swept away by it. It's hard to kind of put it into words. It was a really, really personal moment for me, and I know it's not going to be anywhere near his top 10 pops by the end of his career. He seems to have a massive pop like by the year at this point, but for me, that's my. Not only is it like the loudest pop that I've ever seen in person, it's probably my favourite pop that I've ever seen or experienced. So yeah, that's mine. The Punker came to Wembley.
Ever heard live? I've been privileged to attend WrestleManias 30, 35 and 40 in person. I've been to a couple of AEW shows, 3 including pay-per-views and TV tapings, various WWF house shows, indie shows. So I've seen Steve Austin in his prime. I've seen Cody finish the story. I've seen the Miracle on Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
I've seen all of these, and heard all of these incredibly loud pops. And quite frankly, Austin in Newcastle, up on time, 1999 house show was as loud as the stadium pops. That's how over he was. So I've heard some really, 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 really loud crowd reactions. Edge at Clash at the Castle, and I was there at both, got a louder reaction than Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30.
Wow.
And that was probably a bigger stadium as well, and it was more full. It's the thing about it, I think I was just shocked by it, which might have sort of informed how loud it felt to me as well. I mean, it was just loud enough in and of itself, because Edge, I really like Edge, never really loved Edge, and I think it became a bit of a meme upon his sort of 2020 return. Obviously the Rumble pop was massive as well. Not a big TV draw, not a big needle mover, and people kind of used it to sort of like mock him. So I've never really, especially since he's returned, received him as that huge a star. It was Beatlemania in Cardiff for Edge. It was absolutely insane. Help, I need somebody, not just anybody, Edge. I just couldn't believe it. I could. This is a guy who has literally broken his neck for these people, who has been a main eventer, who's done the TLC matches. Like, if you're a WWE lifer, not necessarily like the TV audience, but if you are a hardcore go to the shows, like, people are besotted with this dude, and I just think it's worth putting over the Edge experience live, because I think the TV ratings tell a probably inaccurate story about how enormously popular he is and was. If you were in that building, he tore the roof off, and he deserves all the respect in the world. He must have loved that moment too.
So there's loads of loud pops that we can talk about, but I thought it made more sense to include one that I was a part of. So I will give a quick shout out to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 38. I was there, best moment of my life. But that's obvious. So let's go back to 2016 at the NXT show before WrestleMania, where Shinsuke Nakamura debuted to take on Sami Zayn. Now, listen, I was aware of Shinsuke Nakamura because that was a time where I think a lot of us were trying to get into New Japan because we wanted to be super geek wrestling nerds. But even though WWE had done a great job in sort of tapping into the allure about Shinsuke Nakamura, and you know, this whole he's the best professional wrestler in the world, which he probably was top 5 at the very least at the time. When he came out with the awesome music and the amazing logo on the Titantron, I remember this because the worst thing I'll ever say, but it happened. We'd literally flown into Dallas 32, right? Yeah. We'd literally flown in that day. I had massive jet lag. Usually I don't get jet lag on that day. Oh my gosh. So I watched a lot of the NXT show going like this, which is terrible. Don't get me wrong, I hated myself for it because you want to enjoy the show. What a great situation to be in. But when he came out, I can't remember, it was in a smaller building, but it must have been, I'm guessing, 5,000 people there. There was a big chunk of people, but it sounded like there was 100,000 people there. And I remember, it's different because it was an open air stadium, but nothing matched it for atmosphere or getting your adrenaline going as much as that. Because Shinsuke is such a performer, the way he came out, the way he sold it, the match itself, Sami Zayn's reaction, it was just incredible. And it was one of those few things where you were like, I'll tie into the first All In as well in 1 second, but it felt like you were part of a happening. And again, that's what it was like in Chicago in 2018, a couple of years later, when I remember when the first match went on, was it the All-State Arena, whatever the arena was, it was so damn loud. And I got emotional because my body was feeling the energy, I suppose, as sad as that sounds, of the entire crowd, and I started getting my own like goosebumps and stuff. So my body thought something was happening, even though it was nothing to do with me. And that really was what it felt like Shinsuke Nakamura debuted. So I suppose you could say, looking at what we did over the last 8 years, maybe it's a bit disappointing, but Nakamura seems pretty happy. He's made a lot of money, he's protected his body, and you know, his legacy is never going to be untouched at this stage because he's too damn good. But yeah, I'll go with that in the loudest pop that I have experienced. But when I was like 4 or 5 years old or whatever it was, I also went to WCW Nitro when they were in London, and we had the opposite of loud pops. Everybody sat on their hands and didn't make a noise, apart from me, who shouted meat over and over again at Sean Stasiak, and he definitely heard because he looked at me with the sad eyes. I've never really forgiven myself. Sean Stasiak, I am sorry.
There's probably louder ones, but the one that really first comes to mind for me is The Undertaker making a surprise appearance at a SmackDown taping in Manchester back in November of 2015. He'd been on the Raw from that same venue, the Manchester Arena, the night before. Then SmackDown was taped on the Tuesday. I believe it was when it aired on Thursdays at that point. We had King Barrett, as he was at the time, talking trash in the ring, when all of a sudden the lights went out and the gong hit. The place, of course, just went absolutely nuts. That gong, man, it has some serious power. You hear that, especially as a surprise out of nowhere, and you know that, yeah, shit is on. Case in point, the reaction the gong received at WrestleMania 14, the Night 2 main event, where everybody lost their minds because that was so out of nowhere. So out came the dead man methodically, slowly, the crowd going crazy. Barrett stood there realizing, yeah, he done messed up. I believe it was a choke slam and then a tombstone, but I could be wrong because it's what, like 9 years ago, geez. Either way, Wade got dealt with in a moment that didn't air on TV and was exclusive for the fans in attendance on that Tuesday night. I think I did see afterwards, remember rightly, that the Undertaker appearance had actually been advertised, but I had not seen that advertisement. And clearly a whole bunch of people at the Manchester Arena had not seen those advertisements either, judging by the reaction that the Undertaker received. A couple of other quick shout-outs as well, though. Despite there being only 3,000 people there, Tommy End, Malachi Black, received a huge reaction when he made his WWE debut at the United Kingdom tournament in January 2017. That was a surprise, of course, coming out to face Neville, and Neville himself got a pretty major reaction because his appearance was also a surprise. And another final, more personal one was Clash at the Castle 2022 for Edge's entrance. I sat with two of my pals, hello Jobskis, who were still are huge Edge fans, and obviously had long thought they'd never get to see Edge wrestle again because of the retirement. So when he came out for his tag match against Finn Balor and Damian Priest, those two absolutely lost their minds. So in terms of up close and personal loudest pops, that one was an absolute cracker.